So let's talk about one of the most notorious figures in all of history, the Roman Emperor Gaius, but you probably know him as Caligula. Was he this beloved leader who just completely lost his mind, or was he a monster from the start whose story got twisted by his enemies? You know, the ancient sources paint this incredibly dramatic and, frankly, contradictory picture. Let's dive in and see if we can figure it out.
Right from the get-go, the Roman elite were absolutely terrified. The historian Tacitus gives us this chilling prediction from the emperor on his way out, Tiberius. What they saw was a young guy who had all the cruelty of the old dictator Sulla, but none of his good points. For the ruling class, Caligula coming to power wasn't just a change of management, it felt like a disaster waiting to happen.
But the Roman people? Oh, they couldn't have disagreed more. While the Senate was basically preparing for the apocalypse, the average citizens of Rome saw the son of their hero, the great general Germanicus. He was the last hope of a family they adored, and this huge difference, this gap between elite fear and public joy, that's the key to understanding the whole wild story of Caligula.
Okay, so let's start with that massive wave of hope. According to the historian Suetonius, when Caligula came into Rome, he wasn't just an emperor, he was treated like a savior. Crowds were lighting torches, making sacrifices, and calling him, get this, star, chick, pet. I mean, these are super personal, affectionate nicknames, right? Not what you'd expect for a new absolute ruler. And the celebration was on a scale that is just mind-boggling. The Senate, even with all their private fears, immediately gave him total power. Suetonius says a staggering 160,000 animals were sacrificed in just 3 months. That's insane. When he got sick, people were literally offering to die in his place. Even Rome's enemies, like the Parthian king, wanted to be his friend. It seemed like the entire world was head over heels in love with Caligula.
And you know, for a little while, it really seemed like all that love and hope was totally justified. Caligula started his reign with a bunch of moves that made everyone think he was going to be one of Rome's greatest emperors, a real champion of the people.
And he didn't just talk the talk. Both Suetonius and Cassius Dio tell us about his popular policies. He put on these amazing, lavish games for everybody. He helped out people who lost their homes in fires, and he finished up big public construction projects. But maybe the biggest shocker of all was this. He published the empire's budget. After the paranoid, secretive reign of Tiberius, this was a radical move. It was an incredible act of transparency. He was ticking all the boxes for a good emperor.
And then we get to this story, which just perfectly captures his flair for the dramatic. He built a 3-mile-long floating bridge out of ships and then just rode his horse across it for 2 days. Why? Well, Suetonius has a few ideas. Maybe to show off the Persian king Xerxes, who'd done something similar. Maybe to scare the Britons he was planning to invade. But my favorite theory? It came from Suetonius' own grandfather. He did it just to prove an astrologer wrong, who had once said Caligula had no more chance of becoming emperor than of riding a horse across the Gulf of Baiae. Incredible.
And then, everything changes. The story takes this incredibly dark, sudden turn. Suetonius marks this exact point with one of the most chilling lines in all of Roman history. The emperor we thought we knew just vanishes, and in his place, we get the monster.
So, what happened? What caused this massive shift? According to the ancient sources, the first really clear sign was his obsession with becoming a god. He wasn't happy just being the ruler of Rome. He demanded that people worship him as a living, breathing deity. This just completely shattered Roman tradition and absolutely horrified the Senate.
Okay, so you gotta understand, emperors being called gods after they died, that was kinda normal by this point. But Caligula wanted something else entirely. He demanded to be worshipped while he was still alive. He built a temple to himself with his own priests and basically said he was on the same level as Jupiter, the king of the gods. For the traditional Roman elite, this wasn't just arrogant, it was pure madness. And the sources list all these bizarre things he supposedly did to prove it. They say he went around lopping the heads off statues of gods and replacing them with his own. He supposedly had whispered conversations with Jupiter, and of course there's the famous story of his horse Incitatus, who got a marble stall and his own servants. Suetonius even claims Caligula planned to make the horse a consul, which, let's be honest, sounds like a story designed to make him look completely unhinged. To top it all off, the sources also accuse him of incest with all 3 of his sisters.
As his god complex grew, so did his cruelty. The second half of Caligula's reign,
at least as it's told by writers like Suetonius and Seneca, is just a non-stop, horrifying list of violence aimed at anyone and everyone who got in his way. It all seemed to start with money. This number, 2,700,000,000 sesterces. What is that? Well, that was the entire massive fortune left by the thrifty Emperor Tiberius. According to Suetonius, Caligula blew through all of it in less than a year. And when the money was gone, he found a new way to get it, by seizing the property of rich Romans, often by accusing them of crimes and having them executed.
His whole philosophy just flipped. The guy who was once so loved now decided to rule by pure terror. This famous quote, which both Seneca and Suetonius recorded, basically became his new motto. Forget love, fear was the new name of the game. And the stories are just gruesome. Suetonius says that when the price of meat for the arena animals got too high, he just started feeding them criminals instead. He would force parents to come and watch their own sons be executed. His favorite way of having someone killed was slowly, painfully, summed up by his infamous order, make him feel that he is dying. Cassius Dio even adds that he turned rooms in the imperial palace into a brothel, forcing the wives and daughters of senators to work there.
His contempt wasn't just for the rich, it was for the very people who used to cheer his name. Suetonius tells this story where, at the games, the crowd started cheering for a team he didn't like. Caligula supposedly screamed in frustration that he wished the entire Roman people had just one neck so he could chop it off in a single blow. Yeah, the honeymoon was definitely over.
You know, a reign like this could only end one way. The constant fear, the endless humiliation. Eventually, it pushed his own inner circle to the breaking point. It really wasn't a question of if he would be taken out, but who would do it and when.
So who were the guys who finally did it? Well, the reasons were a mix of the personal and the political. Josephus and Suetonius say the ringleader was an officer in the emperor's own bodyguard, the Praetorian Guard, named Cassius Chaerea. Apparently, Caligula relentlessly made fun of him for his high-pitched voice, giving him these really humiliating, obscene passwords. Other senators just wanted revenge for their executed friends. But for the Senate as a whole, it had just become a matter of survival. Okay, so here's how it all went down on January 24th, 41 AD. Caligula leaves the games and takes a little shortcut through a deserted hallway in the palace, and there, Chaerea was waiting. After Caligula gives him yet another insulting password, Chaerea strikes the first blow. Then the other conspirators just swarmed in, stabbing the emperor over and over. They say as he lay dying, he was shouting, "I am still alive," so they finished the job. His loyal German bodyguards showed up too late, and in a blind rage, they started cutting down everyone they could find, assassins and even some innocent senators. It was pure chaos.
And the assassins showed absolutely no mercy. To make sure no heir could ever come back for revenge, they also found and murdered his wife, Caesonia, and their baby daughter. It was a brutal, complete extermination of his entire family line.
With Caligula dead, Rome was thrown into total chaos. For one brief, shining moment, it seemed like the nightmare was over, and maybe, just maybe, the old republic could be restored. But that power vacuum was never going to last long. As you can see, Rome was completely split. The Senate, the group Caligula had terrorized, desperately wanted to get rid of the position of emperor altogether and bring back the republic. The people, on the other hand, were terrified of another civil war. But the real power, it turned out, belonged to the Praetorian Guard. They knew their jobs and their influence depended on having an emperor to protect. So they went looking, found Caligula's forgotten uncle Claudius hiding behind a curtain, and just declared him the new emperor. And just like that, the Senate's dream was dead. But wait, before we just stamp this case closed and label Caligula a monster, we have to ask a really important question. Who wrote all this stuff? Our main sources, Suetonius, Seneca, Cassius Dio, they were all part of that same elite senatorial class that Caligula bullied and terrorized. They hated him. They wrote these histories long after he was dead, and they had every reason in the world to paint him in the worst possible light, to justify why he was assassinated and to send a message to any future emperor, don't mess with the Senate. And that, right there, is the ultimate question we're left with. Do we believe the story told by his mortal enemies? Was Caligula really the sadistic, insane monster they describe? Or was he maybe a flawed but popular young emperor whose power grabs so threatened the old elite that they killed him and then spent the rest of history assassinating his character? The sources, they give us a pretty compelling monster. But the truth? Well, the truth is probably far more complicated.
and something we might never fully know.